Right, well, we continue with our gender-based violence discussions, and now we welcome Masimanyane, Executive Director, Dr. Lesley Ann Foster, who is also part of the Presidential Gender-Based Violence Steering Committee. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Lesley, and thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
You know, we have these organizations, one that you're even a part of. We have groups, we have committees whose work includes, highlighting the plight of women. Are we getting somewhere? I mean, the reason I ask is that every day, we switch on the TV, you look at the news, and we'll see yet another woman has been found dead. I mean, it's even to the point now, where we have women's bodies, found in sugarcane fields in KZN. Are we actually getting anywhere?
Unfortunately, the femicides are not abating as yet. We estimate that in August, this particular Women's Month, there have been at least 20 murders of women that we know of. So we have a serious problem on our hands. And we have been trying to address that problem as best we can. However, I think there is a change, a shift in the way we're approaching this. We've always looked at dealing with violence against women from a victim empowerment perspective.
From 1 to 10 for us.
And now,
audio check.
Can I continue?
Yes, continue, please. Yes, continue, please. Yes.
Thank you. And now what we're seeing is that we have, through the Presidential Office, developed a national strategic plan on gender-based violence and femicide. What is different about this plan is that it's built on 6 pillars. And it brings together all sections of society to work together on different elements. So we've worked on responses. We've worked on prevention at an awareness raising level. Now we're saying we have to go deeper. Our analysis, our research in the country has shown that we need to approach this differently. So what is important about the National Strategic Plan is the 6 pillars include accountability and leadership. We need strong leadership. We've got political commitment, but we need leadership on all tiers of government, in civil society, and with our religious and traditional leaders. So all sectors and the private sector needs to come to the party as well. So accountability and leadership is important. The second is looking at laws and policies, and there's extensive work that's been done now to look at tightening the legislation to where there are gaps and loopholes. That's an important new element that we're bringing into as part of the strategic plan. The third is, of course, the responses, looking at support services and healing. How can women all over the country, access that? And then, of course, the most important is prevention. I believe that we have to focus much more on prevention. We don't want to have another Kwasa, losing her life, and then everybody jumping up and saying this is really, horrendous. And we are so outraged by all of these deaths. So prevention is an important pillar, and it has to go beyond awareness raising into addressing the structural drivers of violence, which is the next pillar, economics, looking at the economic aspects of it, and then finally looking at research. So what's happened now is that we have these 6 pillars in the National Strategic Plan. It brings together different role players to work in a coordinated, multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary way. And I believe that if we put our weight behind this, that we will have much better results, and that we can eventually stop the scourge of violence against women. The biggest issue in our society is the way women are viewed. And we have to have a shift in the status of women within our societies. Some of us refer to it as advancing gender equality, because gender equality deals with power relations in our society. What we have at the moment is that women are not respected. They have low status in our society, and their bodies become commodified. That is why some men will treat women as if they are dispensable. If they own their bodies, if they're in a relationship, and if the woman wants to break the relationship, or they want to break the relationship, they feel that they're entitled to then dispose of that woman. That needs to change. And that's a lot of hard work that needs attitude and behavior change, and looking differently at how women are viewed in our society.
Dr. Foster, as you've mentioned, you do have political assistance in the form of support from the government. I mean, this committee was indeed sort of put together by the president himself. It's a presidential steering committee. I mean, if you, as an organization that is getting assistance from government, and we also speak to some who don't necessarily get assistance from government, is struggling in terms of helping with this scourge of violence and abuse and murder of women. I mean, what more would then be needed from the government in terms of assisting these women when there is this committee that has been put together that you're part of? What more will then sort of end what we're going through at the moment?
Well, firstly, the committee's mandate ended in April, on the 30th of April this year, and so we don't exist officially anymore. What is supposed to happen now is that we are supposed to have a National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide that is in the process of being established. So the council then will have the mandate of implementing the National Strategic Plan. But the big problem is that there is political will, and the president said that he would make 1.6 billion rand available for addressing violence against women. Most of that was taken up by government departments, and we have not been able to determine how they've used it. So this again comes down to the first pillar of accountability and leadership. You know, the money can go into a department and be swallowed up into programs that are not necessarily relevant, that are not helpful, and we need strong monitoring to see that that happens. The fact that civil society begs for funding all the time. We've had one of our representatives, Chrislyn Munyon, on television this morning speaking about the fact that shelters are struggling, you know, to get support. Organizations that work on the ground like ourselves need to be supported for the programs that we run. And if the truth be told, most are not funded in that way. We are seen as a pariah within the sector rather than adding value. And we have the greatest reach as grassroots organizations. Most of the organizations in the country working on this are locally rooted grassroots organizations that can provide the services. Government needs to have a support for that. Instead, there's legislation now that is on the table that is going to curtail the kind of activities that we are involved in and that we are able to support women through. So I think we have the political will on one hand, but there are many issues that need to be dealt with by the state and by civil society, because if it's not dealt with, if we're not going to get the support, women are going to continue to die, and we are going to continue to be on the streets toying and protesting against the rising levels of violence. For us, you know, we need to have clear evidence of how SAPS, how the criminal justice system as a whole, how the Department of Social Development and Health is actually working to address this scourge. And it needs to be along these pillars. Otherwise, I think we're just going to be throwing money in the wind when we do, and of course not enough. There needs to be, you know, it's talk is cheap, money buys the realities, the change in the transformation, and we've got to have that investment.
And Doctor, what is your reaction that there's this sort of a growing number of younger women, being killed by their partners? I mean, I've actually opened up, a picture here with a collage of women that were killed by their partners, really in South Africa, and I mean the majority of them are very, very young women. We're looking at Kwasa Zozo, for example, only a first-year student, murdered by a jealous boyfriend. I mean, these are young women that shouldn't even be in these sort of relationships that something like this could even happen. I mean, not even marriages. We're talking about people who are being murdered by a boyfriend who's probably a couple of years older. What exactly should we be doing, and what is your reaction to the fact that these women are getting younger and younger, it seems, that are victims of femicide? I
think, we always put the focus on the women. We always put the focus. This is the history of violence against women has been about the shame and the blame, for violence goes to women. We have to focus on young men. We have to face the reality that we have a toxic masculinity that is developing in this country. And again, it goes back to the social norms, where men feel superior and women are inferior, and where men, because of their superiority, feel that they can own women's bodies and own women's lives. And the fact that women have less status in society means that they are not viewed with the respect that they should be reviewed with, and their dignity is impaired, through the relationships with men. So we have to sort out the social norms, the relationships between men and women, but most of all, we've got to change the way men are influenced within our society. And I'm not going to say the way they're raised, because then the blame goes back to the mother hasn't raised her children properly, which is not true. There are many other influences in our society that actually have more influence than the home these days. Social media is one of them. Advertising, the consumption of alcohol, the linking of this toxic masculinity to alcohol is something that also needs to be addressed. And we saw a drop in the number of cases of gender-based violence and rape when there was a ban on alcohol. And these links we have to address, but the structural drivers, which is patriarchy and social norms, and the devaluing of women, that has to be addressed, as well as issues like our economic policies. We mustn't forget that the fact that women are so dependent on males in many cases, that women have very low-paying jobs, unemployed to a greater extent, that we have a large number of single-headed households, more than 30% in our country, is a problem. That all the responsibility is on women to raise children, and of course they often work for 12 hours a day, so there's no support at home, but they need to do the work in order to be able to provide, for their families. So there are many different aspects that we believe this new national strategic plan, if it gets the commitment. Now, the president's given his commitment, it is not enough. The fact that the government departments have had funding but have not been able to report on that funding and the use of it is about accountability and leadership, a lack of it. And we need to have the right people in the right places to do the job. Sometimes we have, and often we find that we have people put into these positions that haven't a clue as to how to address the issue. And that is a huge problem. That is a very big problem. Again, it comes down to what do they know? Do they have the expertise? Are they consulting? It's different if you don't have the expertise, but you have people that you consult with and get the right kind of input. So there's so many different ways in which we can work successfully to change the tide. And that's what we really need to be focusing on now. And as NGOs, we are going to be monitoring. We're going to be watching what happens, because we want to see, don't want women to die. We don't want women and girls to be raped. We don't want them to be fearful walking down the road. The lack of safety in women's lives is a denial of their basic rights, and we need to stop this in its tracks before we can call ourselves a successful society.
All right, Dr. Foster, great having you on the show here on SABC News. We certainly do appreciate your time and the work that we're doing. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's Dr. Lesley Ann Foster from the Masimanyane Executive Director of Masimanyane, and she was part, of course, of that Presidential Steering Committee on Gender-Based Violence, but continues to monitor and observe what's indeed happening in terms of gender-based violence. And we will be then continuing